On April 23rd, there's a welterweight in this world. His name is Sergey Khandozhko. His nickname is Honda, and he knocked out a man, Matt. And he knocked out a man like a full-sized minivan. We're talking about Khandozhko knocking out Dwight Grant back April 23rd. So what does Grant do? He picks up the pieces and about 2 months later moves up a weight class to middleweight to take on 0-3 UFC fighter, the former champ with We Love MMA. It's Dustin Stoltzfus. And when I look at this fight, it really is weird because when I went back in my notes, I've looked at Dwight Grant's career coming in off of Dana White's Contender Series, and it's been a little bit of a blur. He's had some of the worst fights in UFC history, like his fight against Zach Otto.
The Algeo one was terrible.
He's had the best knockout ever against Carlo Pedersoli, where he pretty well lost the whole first round until the last second of the round when he knocks him out with a head kick. For Dwight Grant, you know the power's there. The show-stopping abilities are there. I mean, he almost finished Daniel Rodriguez until Daniel Rodriguez rallied right back and finished Dwight Grant. It's just been an odd bucket of muscles for the guy who represents Alliance and AKA. And I've seen some interviews out there this week where Dwight Grant's kind of talked about going back to the basics, training at AKA with Daniel Cormier, with Khabib, but he has been an Alliance guy, so that's what I threw up there for the graphics. But when you look at it for Grant, it all boils down to the fact that he has those defensive grappling metrics to go along with his striking. You know how good the power is, but the guy has the lowest output ever, and I'm really eager to see how he makes out at middleweight because he hasn't fought at middleweight in about a decade, and it's an odd one, late career change move, and I have to throw this out there. Giant red flag. You get knocked out like a month and a half, 2 months ago, and then you come back and you're 37. It's an odd one.
Who was it on the last card who just got knocked out, but they look good in their return? Not to put you on the spot. I just remember there was someone on the last card who was coming off.
It was a 4 month
exactly,
layoff.
But that's what I was going to say. He was into that 4 to 6 month layoff where you don't really worry as much, but I agree with you 100%.
Jamie Muller,
thank you.
Sorry.
Dwight Grant making such a fast turnaround is very concerning, but the good news is I kind of think I might like Dwight Grant at middleweight. Now, just because I said it doesn't mean I'm right, but I'm going to give you these reasons for why I believe so. Dwight Grant, like you said, a very long-rangey guy for the welterweight division. Someone who definitely has to cut quite a bit of weight to get down to that weight class. You brought up the D-Rod fight. Dwight Grant looks quite a bit bigger than Daniel Rodriguez in that fight, at least range-wise and how he uses his body. So I do think him moving up to middleweight, I don't expect Dwight Grant to be some massively undersized fighter at this division. And the good thing is, he is fighting a guy who's not really known for his own punching power. So on the feet, I'm not as concerned about Dwight Grant as I would be if he was fighting like a Sean Strickland maybe coming off of a loss. Still not really known for his punching power, but a guy who can put strikes together, who can hurt you if he hits you clean. This fight is very interesting though, because for Stoltzfus, he was very promising coming into the UFC, and we just really haven't seen that guy yet. And in flashes, you'll see good output, you'll see good grappling here and there, but it just feels like he always knows how to lose a fight by the end of it, and it's so frustrating to watch, because I think these guys, they're both one minor shift away from becoming, not a contender, but just becoming a legitimate unranked fighter. Like you said, if Dwight Grant could just up his output to what a UFC standard level would be, I mean, he's got great power, he's got a good jab, he's got good kicks, he's got good takedown defense. If he just had that last Infinity Stone, then I really do think he would be a tough fight for anybody on the outskirts of the top 15. But this fight's really going to test A, his takedown defense against a much bigger guy, and B, how good is his chin? Because if Dustin can move around a lot and get Dwight Grant to meet him halfway with one of his strikes, not hit him just one punch sake, but use his feet, skirt around the cage, make Dwight Grant make a mistake, then maybe Dustin could catch him clean and hurt him.
Dustin Stoltzfus has fought a wicked level of competition for a guy coming into the UFC, lost to Kyle Dawkins in a bit of a non-starter. He got out-grappled by a guy who is widely regarded as a good grappler, but has also had some ups and downs in the UFC. He lost to Rodolfo Vieira late in their fight in the third round, another guy that you don't want to mess around with, and he did get submitted by Gerald Meerschaert his last time out, a guy who has the most submissions in UFC middleweight history with 8.
He has been submitted, though.
When you look at this fight, Matt, for Dustin Stoltzfus, there's going to be a lot of people that say, this guy's 0-3, he sucks, forget about him. Go back and watch his fights before the UFC. This is a guy that would switch it up, switch stances, throw nice lead hooks from either stance, double up on his jab, and he has a bit of an odd story coming into the sport of mixed martial arts because he was a guy that was raised Pennsylvania Dutch, so spoke a little bit of German. He's trained a lot in German, normally billed out a Planet Eater. Seems like for this camp, he's been training in the States, but I went through and looked at it. You consider the background of Stoltzfus, his background's luta livre, and it's not something that you hear very often. And Matt, you give me a dingus look.
For good reason, though. Luta livre doesn't make MMA champions.
Claudio Poyes is a luta livre background guy, and Marco Huas was too.
But how many MMA champions at the UFC level have we seen with luta livre? It's just not a common mixed martial art for guys to translate over to this sport.
Okay, let's focus on Dustin Stoltzfus' finishes that he has by submission. He has 5 total submission wins. 1 by twister, 1 by guillotine, 2 by rear naked choke, and 1 by knee bar. He's very, very dynamic with his takedown attempts when he's given the opportunity to be offensive. You look at the guys that he's fought in the UFC, Kyle Daukaus isn't going to give you that opportunity. Rodolfo Vieira certainly isn't unless he gasses, which he didn't in that fight. And then his last time out against Gerald Meerschaert wasn't able to get it done. Now, when I look at Dwight Grant, I look at the 5-on-in. Again, we talked about the Algeo fight. There was a point deducted in that fight. It was very, very lackluster. And if you look at it, that's this 5th to last fight 3 years ago. His fight against Danny Rodriguez almost 2 years ago, a loss. He beats Stefan Seklic in a fight. Most people thought Stefan Seklic won that fight. He loses to Francisco Trinaldo by split decision. This is not the first time I'm going to talk about Masaran Duba eye-poking somebody and losing a point. Lost a point in this one against Muslim Salikhov. He just eye-poked as many times as he wanted because nobody was taking any points. And for Dwight Grant, his last time out, had a wild fight against Sergey Kondashko, but got knocked down a couple of times. That fight about 2 months ago. So when I do look at this one, again, pre-UFC, Stoltzfus mixed it up. Dwight Grant has way more power than Dustin Stoltzfus. I don't care if it's at 170. I think Dustin Stoltzfus would have to lose like 20 pounds of muscle to make 170 and cut off half his arm. But when you look at a guy like Dwight Grant, this is his first fight at 185 since 2011 with the Reality Fighting promotion. So good opportunity for both guys. But I mean, Matt, you look at Stoltzfus, a Dana White's Contender Series guy as well, slammed his way into the UFC, hurting Joseph Pfeiffer's arm. And for Dwight Grant, he got a good win over there on the Contender Series as well. But when we do look at the odds for this fight, Grant open -175. He's about a -170 right now. Stoltzfus, the underdog, looking for his first UFC win, open +150, +140. We have a look at the Tapology votes. They're a surprise to us. They are to you. I'm going to say over under 65% Grant.
I'll say over.
Just because he's more well-known. Yeah, 625 total votes, 73% Grant, 34% by decision, 58% by knockout. For the 28% that have Stoltzfus, 55% by decision, 24% by submission, 11% by knockout. So in this matchup, again, Grant has the experience in the UFC, has UFC wins as well, and he has that finishing power. Is he going to be able to get it done this weekend?
What I do like about Dwight Grant is, even when he loses, it's because he's trying to win the fight. And a lot of the times, I would much rather a fighter be almost too reckless for their own good than not want to get into that state to begin with. And that's my problem with Dustin Stoltzfus. I just don't know if he's willing to stand in the pocket, eat a shot to give a shot, and do that consistently round after round. Now, for Dwight Grant, again, I cannot put enough red flags on what you said at the start of the video, just about his quick turnaround coming off that knockout loss, because that was a legitimate knockout loss. He was really out of it, and that was a good stoppage. So I'm a little bit worried about Grant's durability in this matchup, but again, Dustin's not the heaviest hand at middleweight, so I do think Dwight Grant, just stylistically, may have got himself a decent matchup in his middleweight debut, so I'm ever so slightly going to pick Dwight Grant, but I will say this, more than any other fight on the card, I am very curious to see how these two guys match up physically with each other on the scales, because if Dwight Grant does look Dustin face-to-face, eye-to-eye, and he looks like he's a real middleweight, then I will be much more confident with Dwight Grant than I am right now, but ever so slightly, I'm leaning on the fence, thinking about going to the natural middleweight, but I'm going to pick Dwight Grant.
I listened to an interview that Grant did with Low Kick MMA a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about the weight cut for this camp and the fact that he can actually eat. He weighs about 200 to 210, so doesn't have to cut all that weight from 200 to 210 to get to 170, so he's happy, he's loving it, this and that. I don't pick guys that get knocked out that soon. So a guy that got knocked out a couple of months ago, making the move up a weight class somewhat of short notice. I mean, yeah, you get a full training camp. He probably took a couple of weeks off anyway. I go with Dustin Stoltzfus. I mean, again, Dwight Grant has been training this camp to defend the takedown, which isn't the biggest part of his game. Don't get me wrong, he has decent takedown defense, but for Stoltzfus, that is the crown jewel of his game. So I'm going to go with the guy representing Pennsylvania in this one, the underdog to get his first UFC win. I've got Dustin Stoltzfus. Matt has the Body Snatcher, not Donald Sutherland out of St. John, New Brunswick, Canada.
Oh, I just think 21 Savage. I'm Mr. Body Catcher, Slaughter Gang, Soul. No? No?
Body Catcher, Body Snatcher, two different things.
I know, but then it's Body Catcher, Soul Snatcher. It puts the two together, Craig. Come on now.
Matt's got Dwight Grant. Enjoy the fights. Listen, you're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.